Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Penn Vicarage on this Wednesday morning. Lovely to see you, and thank you for joining us, as always, for our Bible talk for today. Friends, we are today in Psalm 45. Just to remind you a bit of the context here, there are 5 books of Psalms, and Psalm 42 to Psalm 72 are in Book 2. So Psalm 45 is in Book 2, as you can see. And the context of this morning's psalm is a royal wedding. The king is getting married to the queen. Now, we don't know, we're not told which king it is, but it's obviously quite an occasion, and we find out about that in a bit. It does say that in the italics bit at the beginning that it's according to lilies, so we've got we clearly have floral decorations going on at this wedding. It also talks about of the Koraites, and Koraites were apparently, they were supposed to think of as temple singers, so think of it as the church choir or the cathedral choir, that sort of thing. So we have here a royal wedding going on, and we have music, we have flowers, we have beauty. It's clearly quite an occasion too. And I want to just say one other thing for those of you who are interested, really, that in the Old Testament there are 2 words used for God. The primitive one, the original one, is El, spelled E-L. And the other one is the word which was given by God to Moses at the burning bush, which is Yahweh, Y-H-W-H, which means, and it's often written in the Bible as the Lord. So there are 2 words for God. One is El, the other one is Yahweh. And generally speaking, El comes out as God. Yahweh is often translated in the English, often in capital letters, the Lord, in capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. Now, the reason I tell you this is because Book 2 of the Psalms tends to use the word El rather than the word Yahweh. But we'll come back to that in a minute. But for this morning, we have ourselves a royal wedding on our hands. So here goes, Psalm 45. My heart overflows with a godly theme. I address my verses to the king. My tongue is like the pen of a ready scribe. You are the most handsome of men. Grace is poured upon your lips. Therefore God has blessed you forever. Gird your sword on your thigh, O mighty one, in your glory and majesty. In your majesty ride on victoriously, in for the cause of truth and to defend the right. Let your right hand teach you dread deeds. Your arrows are sharp in the heart of the king's enemies. The people fall under you. Your throne, O God, endures forever and ever. Your royal sceptre is a sceptre of equity. You love righteousness and hate wickedness. Therefore God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness beyond your companions. Your robes are all fragrant with myrrh and aloes and cassia. From ivory palaces, stringed instruments make you glad. Daughters of kings are among your ladies of honour. At your right hand stands the queen in gold of Ophir. Hear, O daughter, consider and incline your ear. Forget your people and your father's house, and the king will desire your beauty. Since he is your Lord, bow down to him. The people of Tyre will seek your favour with gifts, the richest of all the people with all kinds of wealth. The princess is decked in her chamber with gold-woven robes. In many-coloured robes she's led to the king. Behind her the virgins, her companions, follow. With joy and gladness they are led along as they enter the palace of the king. In the place of ancestors, you, O king, shall have sons. You'll make them princes in all the earth. I will cause your name to be celebrated in all generations. Therefore the peoples will praise you forever and ever. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So, we have ourselves quite an occasion here. The king is getting married to the princess who's obviously going to become the queen. We have flowers, we have music, we have a really quite a majestic scene. So we don't know whose wedding it was, but in a sense it doesn't matter. The psalm is essentially in 5 sections. I think it's often helpful with these things to sort of cut it up into sections, into sort of bite-sized chunks so you can kind of see what's going on. The first section is verse 1, which talks about the guy that wrote it, his motivation for writing it, and therefore, big about verses 1 and 2, therefore God was blessed you forever. So verses 1 and 2, the first section is a little bit at the beginning saying why he's writing it, because it's a fantastic occasion, and therefore God's going to bless him forever and ever. That's the first bit. Section 2 is all about the king. Section 3 is a bit of a funny one, because I'm not quite sure whether it's talking about the king or God, but we'll come back to that in a minute. That's section 3, call it the funny bit in the middle. Section 4, which is verses 10 to 16, is about the Queen and is getting married. And verse 17, again, is a bit like the first section. I will cause your name to be celebrated in generations. Therefore, the peoples will praise you forever and ever. So you've got the first bit at the beginning, motivation of the writer. The second one is about the king. The third bit is about God, I think. Come back to that. Section 4 is about the Queen. And the fifth section is, again, saying from the writer writes, I will cause your name to be celebrated, therefore your people will praise you for ever and ever. So 5 sections there. So go straight in then to section 2 about the king. Now what's interesting here about the king is that clearly he's a great king. He's clearly very successful. He leads the people in the battles he takes part. He wins. He also talks about defending the truth and the cause of truth, defending the right. And so he's clearly a king of justice to righteousness. So the king here in the second section he's obviously a good king. He leads the people into good success, but also he's right and he's just as well. So that's about the king. Then we'll talk about the Queen in section 4. She is clearly very beautiful, but she's also, interesting enough, told to leave her past behind and to throw herself entirely into her royal duties and to being a wonderful queen, basically. So she's told to kind of leave the past behind and throw herself into her new married life. And I think in a sense there's a kind of the moral there for all of us, or not all of us, I've been married a long time, but for the people who are considering getting married, that actually when you get married, you have to some extent leave your past behind and throw yourself into your new married family. And that's the new family that you become when you get married. How does the Bible put it? For this reason, a man leaves his father and mother and becomes united to his wife. So it's men and women. When we get married, we need to leave our past behind, if you like, and throw ourselves into our new situation, our new marriage, which is important to do. Bit of marriage preparation, therefore, just chuck that one in. And then we get the bit in the middle, which is all about, it could be about God, but it could be about the king as well. And it's quite interesting because it says in verse 6, your throne, O God, endures forever and ever. Your royal scepter is a scepter of equity. And it's interesting because it's not quite sure whether God here is talking about the king, or whether it's talking about God. Or even more dangerously and even more courageously, perhaps even referring to the king in divine terms, which is, as you can imagine, very, very controversial because, especially in Jewish thought, that there is only one God. And the king is great, but he's not God. So I'm starting to ask myself the question, could it be that he's actually carefully referring to somebody else who might be here? Which makes me think about Jesus. Because the Bible makes it clear in the book of Revelation that one day there's going to be a marriage in heaven between Jesus and his church. We are described in the Bible as the bride of Christ. And that actually puts a whole different thing in it, because of course in Jesus' case, he is both king and God as well. And of which kind of reminds us, tells us about who the church is and who Jesus is. That Jesus is the one who leads us in success. And Jesus is the Prince of Peace and justice and so on. And there is no injustice, there's no wrongness, if you like, with Jesus. But it also tells us in a sense about who we are as the church. That like the bride in the wedding here is told to leave her past behind and to throw herself into her new situation, to her new marriage to the king. In a sense, we are called to do that too. That as Christians, we are called, if you like, to make our number one priority has to be following Jesus, to be following our King. And as the bride of Christ, we need to be committed to doing things his way and having him as the Lord of our lives. So why I think it's quite, as I said, funny, but it was quite interesting as well, because in a sense, equating the king with God actually makes me think about Jesus and what it's telling us, and therefore who he is, that he is the king, but also that we as the bride of Christ, we are to be committed to him, which means, as a sense, leaving our old ways behind and making him our number one allegiance. So here we have this incredible scene of this royal wedding. Okay, we have flowers, we have music, we have beauty. It's just all there to be seen. And we don't know whose wedding it is. In a sense, it's quite interesting. We're not told, because I think that could be interesting as well. Again, possibly referring to Jesus. So we have this royal wedding going on here, and it talks about the king being just and being righteous, and being successful. We've got the Queen being beautiful and therefore being throwing ourselves into her marriage to the King. Then we've got the bit in the beginning, in the middle there, when we have the King being almost associated with God, which makes me think about Jesus and who therefore we are, that he is our King. And as the church, we are the bride of Christ. And therefore we are to be, as the bride here is told, to leave her past behind and be committed to her husband here. So in a sense, we as the body of Christ are called to give ourselves our number one allegiance to our King, who is Jesus. I'm not sure I've explained it very well, but I hope that makes sense. Do feel free to read it again. It's a